This episode of the Beer Bound Podcast is brought to you by Rolling Hops Beer Tours.
Hey everybody, Garrett here from Rolling Hops, as always joined with my partner,
Andy.
We're here to tell you guys about our virtual craft beer tour offering. With what's going on in the world, unfortunately, we haven't been able to run our historical craft walking beer tour, so we've pivoted to taking the virtual experience of craft beer directly to you guys. Wonderful for team building events, corporate events, even just a night out or in, for that matter, with your friends and family. And we're doing this online.
Have any questions about the beer tours or want us to tailor make an event for you? Just shoot us an email or send us a message on any form of social media. Rolling Hops, you can find us everywhere.
RollingHopsBeerTours.com is where you can get a hold of us, and we'll see you guys soon.
Cheers. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are here for a special in-person podcast video edition of our Rolling Hops new podcast. So we're delighted to be on site at Furnace Room Brewery in beautiful Georgetown, Ontario, just outside the hustle and bustle of our provincial capital, Toronto. We're here with the delightful Adam Wilson, the sales director for Furnace Room. Adam, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Yeah, wonderful. Could you maybe start us off just with a little bit of information about the brewery itself, as well as your background in beer?
Wow, okay. So Furnace Room started doors opened in 2018. The idea behind Furnace Room came a couple years before. A few guys, Mike, Blake, and Jeff, all came from different backgrounds. Mike was actually a police officer, and Mike and his wife, they had a child, Olivia, who ended up with some special needs. His wife had to quit work in order to help facilitate things. Yeah. So they realized that they couldn't get by on the salary that he was working. So Mike had some ideas regarding businesses that involved frontline responders, and through his, this wide, curving road, he met a couple of guys, got into some real estate, and that's where he met Blake. And so Blake and Tim were doing this, and they were like, we want to do something else. And through some meetings, they met this gentleman named Jeff, and Jeff is a home brewer. And Jeff brewed in the furnace room of his house.
And there it is.
Yeah.
Click, click.
There we are. So the three of them started chatting and decided that they wanted to do to make a brewery. So they decided, they found this location, and this was around 2016, I believe. Okay. They bought this building, and what they found out shortly thereafter, after they had purchased the building, was back in the 1920s, CN had bought a good portion of what is Elgin Street, which is this short little street that runs up here. So they found out, so CN Metrolinx became CN, or CN became Metrolinx.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So they found out they actually had no thoroughfare to their own brewery.
Oh, like across the tracks? Or just
right here, to come into it, to have people come in, to set everything up. So it actually took a couple of years to get the paperwork done, the legalities done, all that kind of stuff. So, thankfully they were both working the real estate stuff that they were doing, and able to
government bureaucracy.
So 2 years later, they were finally able to open the doors, and they started with 4 15-barrel fermenters, and went from there. And their first day open, they made $18,000 in sales. They were like, we've got something going on here, and I think within 6 weeks they had to actually double their size to actually be able to do everything for the local people of Georgetown. So I came on board. Actually, I've just been on board for the last few months. I came on board as the sales director. So my background is I'm all over the place. I'm from the East Coast. Went to school for radio broadcasting. That didn't work out because it's terrible money and you can't make a living off of it.
Yeah.
And I was in Toronto and I went back to bartending. And through years of bartending, I became enamored with what was the fledgling craft scene at the time. And so fast forward to 2010, I finally had enough of the industry and the late nights, and had met my wife, and she worked days, I worked nights, it wasn't working. So I left and went back to school for woodworking, which turned out to be another great hobby. I'm really good at going back to school and not doing anything with diplomas. It's absolutely fantastic. So
school is great.
So I worked in the field for a few years, so it actually paid off the student loan, which is nice. And then we decided, we had our daughter Edie, and she was about 1 at the time, and we were living down in Simcoe, and decided we wanted to change, and we had both been used to moving around. So a few years down there, we were like, all right, let's try something new. We were looking to go back to the East Coast. My wife had only seen it from our vacations down there, and she really liked it, and I really liked it. And we decided to go to the East Coast, and she applied for one job out in BC and got it. So we went
far from the East Coast.
Completely the opposite direction, which was fun. But when we got out there, I was kind of at loose ends, and I had taken on a job. I was doing fire safety installation. So, it was so utterly random. And I was like, it's not what I want to be doing at all. And I want to be working in the craft beer industry because I really enjoy this, And so the first job I got was a contract job for Stanley Park Brewing. The day that I started was the day that Stanley Park was purchased by AB InBev.
Oh.
So still not working in craft beer.
Right. The universe didn't want
like,
you.
What the hell, guys?
You're going to be in the macro industry. Yeah.
So I ended up actually getting a job at working at a tap room at a small little place in Langley called Trading Post. And the guy that was the brewer there, Tony DeWald, started his career 1,000 years ago back when Amsterdam was getting up and going, and he learned to brew there, and then he went out to the BC scene, and the guy's a legend in the industry. So he took me on as his assistant brewer, and it turns out I'm really bad at brewing beer, and I've got it talking about it, but super bad at brewing it. So he said, I don't want you working for me anymore. I was like, well, okay, I guess I'll...
Honesty is the best policy.
It was a terrible policy is what it was. I hated his policy. So at the same time, Bose Brewing was hiring, they were doing a cross-Canada expansion. So they were looking for brand ambassadors, provincial managers, and were hiring in a few markets, and BC was one of them. And to make a short story super long, because that's what we're here for, is they had, working with the HR guy, chatting with the HR guy, he's like, Adam, can you find us a few spots? Because we're going to be doing Winnipeg, Calgary, and Vancouver over 2 days interviews. And I was like, that sounds intense. He's like, yeah, so can you find a couple of good beer bars to do these spots? And so there was I found 4 or 5 locations, sent them off to him. One of them was this place down in Gastown. And he's like, all right, we're going to do your interview at the Gastown location. Can you book a booth or something, somewhere where we can talk? So went down, booked the booth. Night arrives, 7 o'clock. I walk in. The place is jammed. Like, you couldn't swing a cat around there without hitting somebody. I was like, holy shit, what is happening? And I look up. It's the gold medal game of Canada-US World Junior Championships. And I was just like, no.
Good timing.
This is the worst thing I've ever done. So the guys show up. They look ragtag. They're in their Bose hoodies. There's 3 of them. They come in. our booth is there. Thankfully, they saved our booth. We sat down, and the entire time they're like watching the big screen above my head. I'm like, over here, guys, like, over here. So we're had this conversation with them, and I got a phone call that I was hired. It's just like, that's why would
Maybe
you
it was
do
the
that?
best thing you could have done.
Right? Well, their whole thing was you were
fans,
able to actually keep a conversation going.
Yeah.
The game on.
I was like, oh, okay, cool, fantastic. So it was an amazing experience. I got to know the industry real quickly from the sales side of things because I was out there by myself, and I had my team of my friend that was in Alberta, my friend that was in Nova Scotia. The four of us were a pretty tight knit group, and doing festivals and tasting beers, and at that point Bose was releasing something every 5 minutes or so, and doing all those things and really getting to learn it, and that kind of part of it fell apart a little bit, and they decided to cut back on the whole expansion program, and so I moved back to Ontario, stayed with Bose for for another 3 years, I guess, in southwestern Ontario, and then moved on to Boschcom up in Halliburton, where I was their sales director for about a year or so, and they changed direction. They wanted to keep the regionality as their focus. So that's when I happened to find the guys here at Furnace Room, and we hit it off right away. And it's been a fantastic couple of months so far. So that's a really long story, eh? Yeah.
Not too long. That's good. It's very precise.
We got
Right?
the whole craft beer expansion of your
Of my
career.
life.
Right. Yeah. So you had the experience in sales and marketing in the craft beer world.
Yes.
That's suffice to say. How can you shed a little bit of light? Obviously, in Canada, across the nation, we have over 1,000 breweries. How do you differentiate yourself as a smaller player in the craft beer scene when there's such a plethora of, I dare say, competition?
I guess if you asked me this question 2 years ago, it would be a completely different answer. So you are, it is hard. It is hard to stand apart. I think what it comes down to at this point is honesty and making good beer. If you can do those things and you can get that liquid into people's hands and have them try it out and have a conversation with them. I mean, we are knocking on doors every day. I have my own territory. It's not, I don't sit at home or sit in an office and, this is what I do, It's
Ivory tower.
craft beer sales guy. So it's super illustrious. So I got a new shirt. So there's that. It's a big part of it. So what happened with us here at Furnace Room is the key thing that they wanted to do was focus on Georgetown, because Georgetown is a bedroom community that has popped up the last 30 odd years or so. It is the expansion of the GTA, and so unlike the Hamiltons or the Niagara region that has this long history behind it, Georgetown didn't, and they're still trying to find their identity, and it's happening. People are, if you go into the downtown core of Georgetown, it's super awesome. There's great little restaurants and boutique shops and all that kind of stuff. So all the beers were named after something local, and that kind of helped with that identity purpose of it. So whether it was Beardmore was named after the gentleman that opened the tannery in this area.
Beardmore.
Yes, which is our Lagerdale. We initially had named it a Kolsch, and it turns out that in Ontario, the name Kolsch just doesn't sell well. People do not have.
Funny coming from Bose, which
it was fantastic. It was a nice. I was like, oh, I know how to sell a Lagerdale. Yeah. That's great. It really helps that Beardmore is a phenomenal beer. It's as a sales guy, these are things that I am supposed to say, but as a big chubby beer guy, I really like good beer, and I'm happy to be able to drink the Beardmore. And the Chicken Man is an even better story, because there was a guy that used to ride around Georgetown on his bicycle. It's an older guy, and he had a basket on the back of it, and he rode around with his chicken on the back of his bike, like all day. Like that was his thing. He would just bike around.
Chicken.
So he passed a number of years ago. I don't think we hadn't been able to find any family. So it's the beer is more of an homage to him, and it's also an homage to that small town hero kind of guy that everybody, if you grew up in a small town, everybody knows. Yeah. That's a guy, and it's awesome, and people can really relate to it. And I think that's a big part of what the craft world is all about, is the stories, and it's about relatability. And people don't. I mean, I waved that flag even though I started my career out of macro by accident. I waved that craft flag so high, like as long as people are like, there's a disingenuousness that can creep into the industry where people throw around the word craft like this badge of honor, whereas really they're just using it as a marketing tool. But you could tell in the beer, in the people that work in the breweries, and that's I don't know if I've answered your question or not, but I mean that's kind of where I stand on the craft thing.
For sure. Yeah. And I like that you mentioned, with a focus on locality and things like that, and that's something we certainly like to highlight. And I was just looking at your website, and one of the offerings that you guys have is Brewery Tours, which isn't uncommon, but I like the aspect that you actually have another tour where locals have the opportunity to then participate in a function of the brewing, which I thought was really interesting. So maybe you can tell us a bit about how that sort of came to be.
You just did. No, I mean,
all right,
you
next.
really just
added it on. There we go.
Thank you very much. That was really well done. I think it stemmed from the idea of seeing people go through these brewery tours. And when you go in and you stand in the, you kind of walk behind the wizard's, curtain there and see what's behind there. And honestly, guys, what's behind there is a bunch of chemicals and
big old tanks,
and it's super industrial. And you stand there and somebody hands you a few malts or a couple of hots in your hand, and
you smell them,
and then they're like, "Cool, can you throw those in the garbage? We're not going to put those into our brew and just ruin them." So, there is nothing about the process that it's neat for 5 minutes or whatever the case may be, and hopefully you get a good story out of it if somebody's doing the tour properly. But what more can you do? And again, it goes back to that differentiation that what do we do from here, and that's where that came from. Is well, let's somebody be able to go home and say, "Hey, cool, we took part in this brew," and they feel more connected to it. And you're going to be happier to drink a Chicken Man that you actually took part in, as opposed to just going to the store and saying, "Hey, this is a cool can. Let's drink this." So we don't do it all the time. I don't know if you've met brewers. They're an introverted bunch, and if you start throwing people from the street at them, they're just going to be like, "I'm going to go over to this other brewery now or there where people aren't allowed doing this."
That's cool. It's like you can say, "Hey, I helped brew this beer," right? A cool story to tell at the very least, right? It's awesome.
It's cool because when I actually started doing it professionally, and I remember the first time I did a brew, and it was Cranberry Tardale. I know exactly what it was, because it also looked like I was in a horror movie after I dumped that much concentrate of cranberry, and it basically landed all over me. I was like, this is cool. But I mean, what an awesome experience. I knew when that can hit the shelves, that's mine.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a bit of a different story. I was working it, but I mean, it's such a cool feeling that if you're coming in off the street and able to do that, that's pretty wild.
Do you miss it at all, Adam, actually being a part of the brewing process instead of being behind the scenes?
No.
Not at all.
I don't know if I can reiterate this anymore, but I was pretty shit at it. I was kind of terrible at brewing beer, and it's hard work. There's a lot of heavy lifting that's involved. It's hot back there. You're working with dangerous chemicals. Plus, you need to figure out all the science behind this. If you screw one thing up, you're pouring one of these huge vats down the drain. Like, there is stress behind it. Like, I used to watch Tony, and I've watched other brewers work, and kind of when they're in brew day, leave them alone. Like, they're like,
Plugged
you know,
in.
super plugged in, and that wasn't me. I can't concentrate like that. It's a terrible way of life for me.
You're an extroverted man.
Sell the beer.
Sell the beer.
Sell
Let's
it.
talk about the beer. Let's drink the beer. You know, that's cheers. You know, that's what I want
Gotcha.
to do. You know, and I've made a career out of it.
Yeah.
So.
Can you tell us about the variety of beer you offer here at Furnace Room?
I can.
Like your staples. How big is experimentation to your brand?
Yep. It's so we start with our core four. It's Beardmore Lager Ale. It's the Chicken Man Pale Ale. It's the Right House Red Ale, and it's the Dynamo Cream Lager. The cream lager is essentially cream ale. We put a different play on it. It's what it is. To get behind that the cream ale is a hybrid style. It's an ale lager combination. So we were like, cool, it's an alcohol. Let's just switch that around a little bit because nobody's calling it the other way around. So
It is quite a unique name.
Do
Cream
that.
lager you don't see very
Right?
Yeah,
so,
that's true. Yeah.
So what was neat was when we first started with these four beers at the LCBO, we had put in our application, and it's a big process and the whole bit. And it was right around when COVID hit. Our timing has been nothing if not interesting since
Impeccable.
the get-go, right? It's like, hey, it's kind of like you guys. It's, hey, let's tour around with a bunch of people and show them stuff in a small space. Cool. Oh, a pandemic.
Wait.
That'll be fun. So when they accepted the Beardmore into the LCBO, but the way they do things is if something goes live in their system, it's live. So we found out that all four of our beers were actually live in the system. So we just were like, well, you guys allowed this, so we're going to sell all these beers. So we sold these four beers, and we scaled up to make that happen. So we did this for about a year, and finally head office was like, guys, you can't do this. This isn't... So we were like, well, you open the door for it. So there was this back and forth. And they were like, well, we're getting rid of these other SKUs. And we were like, give us a bone here, because we've scaled up because of this. Because
you have all four varieties.
Yeah, so that's why. So we've got in the LCBO, we've got the Beardmore, and we've got Chicken Man.
Chicken Man.
So thanks to that happening and good sales. So those are our core four, and then from there we have Fountain Green, which has been a pretty staple, which is our New England IPA, and it was our seasonal in the spring. And again, it lasted until the seasonal is only supposed to last about 3 months, and then they get rotated out and new stuff gets brought in. Well, they kept it live in the system until September. So we were just like, keep selling it until you guys tell us.
Keep it going.
We're going to keep doing, we're going to play this over and over again until you guys tell us to stop. So
Get tired of it.
right? Or just give us permanent listings. We'll be fine with it. We'll sell the beer. Don't worry about it. But we have, we've done stuff like we've dry hopped the Beardmore, so we've got that. We've got our Mosaic Pale Ale, which is a single hopped pale ale, which is phenomenal. Matt does pale ales and IPAs so wonderfully. Like they're pretty much his thing. But we do small batch Saturdays. So we've got a small pilot program. So this is where we can test some new stuff out.
Oh, amazing.
And it's really, it's like, I don't even know, I think it's basically a couple of kegs that comes out of it. We sell them on a Saturday, and when they're gone, they're gone. So, but
Sort of a test pilot.
It's
like-
100%.
yeah.
We can actually get, we don't have to hire somebody to come in and, a group to come in and try a bunch of beers. Here it is. We're going to put it on tap. You guys tell us what you think about it, and we go from there. So that's kind of where Fountain Green came from. We've got our fermentator, which is coming to the LCBO next month, which is a double IPA, and it came out of the same process. We've got a barrel program, a small barrel program that's happening back there. We have bourbon barreled Imperial Stout that's sitting back there right now that's going to be ready for the holidays.
Bourbon, ale, and
Stout
Imperial
season,
Stout.
Right, I'm so friggin' excited for it. 'Cause it's that British style of beers where I hang my hat. Like, I'm just
mixed with a bit of Kentucky in there.
Right? Yeah. I mean, if you want to throw hard liquor at it too, then fantastic. Let's do it all. It's Matt had tried some the other day, and it's sitting at like 13% right now.
Oh.
We might do a small blend with like with another stout just to kind of just
Relax it a little bit.
just maybe just take a bit of the edge off of it. But I'm so friggin' excited for it. Yeah,
Nice and
it's
warm
gonna be
going
good.
down.
Right?
Yeah. I'm all for it. I love an Imperial
Yeah.
Stout. Yeah.
No, it's great because this is one of the things about small breweries like this is that we can do that. We can experiment a little bit more, and it's gonna cost whatever the price of ingredients is, and then just getting it out there to people. And if we find it's something that people can relate to, because every once in a while you find that beer that people like, almost every beer that we put out, people are like, oh, that's pretty good, and then every once in a while you find that one where people are like, this is fantastic, and that's when let's try that
Give me
again.
more of that.
It is.
Yeah. We've done a sour series that sours are a very popular item that are out there, and I mean my wife is a prime example of the sour drinker. She's just like, throw it at me and
Give me those fruity sounds.
right. If she can't feel it like up here, like the tartness doesn't hit her,
pucker,
right?
right,
Like
your
if her
jaws.
eyes don't just start doing water every time she has it, she's like, this isn't a good sour. So we've been experimenting with some of those and sell those out of the brewery and online and stuff like that. So
Awesome.
In terms of scale, you mentioned a little bit about being in the LCBO. Obviously, Ontario is an interesting provincial entity and how protective we are in distribution and sales of alcohol. Things are maybe changing because perhaps exacerbated a little bit through COVID. Things at least were in a realm of discussion in terms of loosening up this this protective way of distribution of alcohol. How has your experience been with dealing with the LCBO? Is that sort of the way you prefer to scale the business itself? Do you really go with, or do you prefer to go with the quintessential way that craft breweries operate in staying local and being a community entity and being a focal point of Georgetown? Or do you see the scaling of the brewery through avenues of getting attached to the LCBO and distributing your beer across Southern Ontario and beyond?
there's so many questions in there.
Yeah, I gave you good luck.
All right. Here, how much time? From my personal, we'll start with personal experience, because I think, all professional experience is bred from personal experience. So, being out on the West Coast, where they have this hybrid role between government and they have privatized liquor stores, opened my eyes to a lot of things that Ontario is missing. One of the things that came out of this pandemic, I will never say good things came out of this pandemic. This pandemic has been a terribly, awfully hard thing on everybody. It's, whether physically or mentally or whatever the case may be. So I won't downplay that by saying this has been fantastic for breweries, because it is. I don't think that's fair. So, but what I will say is that there have been enough loopholes created within our industry over the last year and a half that has allowed us to expand things a little bit. As we stand right now with the fact that we basically are dealing with two monopolies. We're dealing with the beer store and we're dealing with the government-run LCBO. Mm-hmm. As a sales rep and as somebody who goes into these places, it is so frustrating. You walk into a place and you hear, and I mean, they are the largest sellers of beer in the world. They do what they can. I will give them credit there. there's an aspect of them that really tries to make it happen, but they are also, you've put business in the hands of government, which is a terrible thing to do to begin with, in my personal opinion. And Jesus, my socialist flag's gonna start waving here in a second. So what you have is this, you're dealing with spirits, you're dealing with wines, you're dealing with ciders, you're dealing with RTDs, you're dealing with all of these different aspects within this big group. And so they're like, okay, well, we get 50% of our sales comes from wine, and 40%, 20, I'm making up numbers right now, but 20% comes from spirits, and 8% comes from beer. And of that 8 to 10%, or whatever that number is, 70% of that comes from the macros. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden we're left staring down the barrel of about 2 or 3% of what is sold through the LCBO. And quite frankly, they don't care that much about that 2 or 3%. So you walk into some stores and you're going to find beer ambassadors that are just absolutely adore what they do. But they're dealing with restrictions of SKU space, and they're dealing with this, and they're dealing with that, and there's so many different things. Whereas in the privatized system, you walk into a store and a guy is just like, I love this friggin' beer, so I'm going to put this on my shelf. And they're not dealing with quite the same restrictions. So when you have the people that are making the policies also making money off of said policies, there's a problem with that. And I think that's the problem here in Ontario, and it's the problem in a lot of provinces. So I mean, I'm not sitting there like shaking a fist at the LCBO. I've had some wonderful opportunities with managers over the years and with people in head office over the years. There are people that truly care about this industry. But my problem that I have is when you're dealing with somebody from head office saying in the media that we love our local partners, we love working with local craft brewers, and we want to see them succeed, and then turn around and saying to their stores, let's cut 120 SKUs, but don't do it to the Molsons and the Labatt's and those guys, because those are the guys that we make our money off of. That's where my problem arises with it. And there's me stepping down off my soapbox. So.
Right, gotcha.
Yeah.
Fair enough. In terms of the brewery itself, your individualistic, your independent distribution, is that still, I suspect that's your core focus on looking at this brick and mortar as the main distributor?
This is home. So let's look at that side of the coin. Sorry, you asked 20 questions in the last one. A rant on one side.
Don't just keep adding that. You got to keep up with them.
Watch my head get redder as we go. No,
you didn't acknowledge all 5 questions. Come on.
God, I suck as an interviewee. This is how you build. You have to build in your backyard first. It's the only way. I mean, number one, we're a business. We need to pay our employees. We need to, pay our rent. We need to do all of these things. We need to buy our equipment. I mean, capital costs on a brewery, I don't care what size you are, they're ridiculous. So that stuff has to be taken in mind. But at the same time, we started in Georgetown, and Georgetown is our home. Not all of us live in Georgetown, but this is home for Furnace Room Brewery. That being said, for us to succeed, what we want to do is we do want to be straight across the province. We do want to be a household name in the craft beer world. We do want people to be excited about what we come out with. Whether those core 4 stay the core 4, things change. So, whether Right House is still part of that core 4 tomorrow or becomes a seasonal, who knows? But at the middle of it is, how do we stay true to who we are? How do we focus on our local clientele? And then how do we expand from there? So that's kind of what I was brought on board for, is we've got a great team in-house here who's able to deal with all the stuff that we need to deal with in terms of being a local brewery. And then I get to help out with my team on the other side of things. So getting beer into breweries, into restaurants in Ottawa, or going into places down in Windsor and walking into the local LCBO and doing that while still staying true to those values.
Just to that effect, like I know you're in charge of sales, and there's the option obviously of LCBO and beer store, and then obviously some private endeavors. Is there a change that you think you'd like to see, maybe within your scope of sales, that you think would benefit not just Furnace Room, but a lot of local craft brewers?
I think that if you opened up the market a little bit more, like there's so many restrictions in the craft beer world, in the liquor, in the alcohol world. I mean, if you take a look at what's happening in cannabis, cannabis actually has less restrictions, and they're 3 years old,
Right.
than we do, and
Pot shops on every corner.
Every corner is independently owned. Yes, granted, they're part of bigger conglomerates and this, that, and the other thing. But, there's the comparison right there. Why is something that 3 years ago there was this pot's bad. Like, I mean,
illegal.
It was illegal. Like, I mean, I remember conversations with my father, like, growing up, like, this guy was so dead set against weed, and I was just like, what is your friggin' problem, old man? Like, you grew up in the 60s. Like, you got married the weekend of Woodstock. Why are you shitting on me about weed? Like, and he was like, it's illegal. And then, so when the switch happened, I swear to God, I actually had a job offer in the cannabis world, and I almost took it strictly so I could call my dad up and say, I'm selling pot for a living. But when I actually told him that story, he laughed. He was like, well, it's legal now, so I don't care. And I'm like,
Your dad's
Crazy, that
smoking
shit.
a joint.
right? Like, so from my perspective, the less regulations that we have, the better it's going to be for breweries, the better it's going to be for independent owners. The better it's going to be for the government as well, because you're going to have a whole new subset of people that can go out there and start businesses. If you're starting businesses, you're paying rent, you're paying, you're still paying for all those regulations and all those things you need to do to open up a business. Mm-hmm. All that stuff is going back into the government coffers, and you're still paying distribution costs to the government because it still runs through the LCBO. So for it to be, my God, apparently I'm back on this. Thank you for bringing me around to my soapbox again. But these are the things that are going to open it up, and they're going to make more money for everybody, and it's going to be more. It's going to have this more organic, sustainable feel to it. Like if you can go out and you can find Furnace Room, because the person who's opened up that store was like, holy shit, this is a good beer, as opposed to the SKU count won't allow it. Sorry, it's you can't carry everything, but if you're carrying the same 15 brands with like 13 SKUs each, it's not doing anybody any favors except for the government.
Yeah.
That's big.
Yeah. Well, Adam, we really appreciate your time. It's wonderful getting this insight from you, learning about Furnace Room, your experience. It's been wonderful. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all our interviews and beer-related content. Remember, craft beer is here.